Well, hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the New Ground Life and Leadership podcast. Today I'm thrilled to be joined by Denise Brown. Denise is part of City Hope Church in Bermondsey, where she's been for over 30 years. She is the mother of 5 children, wife of Paul Brown, who appeared on this podcast 18 months ago. And she's also been working as a TA for over 20 years as well, and seen God do some wonderful things in the school that she's in. So I'm looking forward today to talking to Denise and hearing her story and drawing out all of the good stuff that God's done in her life, whether through her family or through some health challenges, and through hearing about what God's doing in the school that she works. So Denise, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you for asking me, Jez. Thank you.
Yeah, it's lovely to have you. Yeah, lovely to have you. Lovely to meet you. Denise, why don't we kick things off by you introducing yourself to our listeners properly and sharing with us a little bit about how you became a Christian in the first place?
Well, it was a long time ago now, and I thought there's got to be more to life than this. I was leading a life where I was partying every night, going out. Came from a family, no Christians in my family at all. But I'd heard about Jesus as a little girl at Sunday school, and my parents didn't take me to that. You just went on your own in the 60s. You could do that. And I always believed God was real and Jesus was real, but I didn't know how to find him. And when I was about 22, I'd been really saying, God, are you real? Because I'd led this party life out and about every night. I'd gone to New York to live for a year, and I was only 20 at the time. And then I came back and I was just thinking, God, are you real? How do I find you? And then the moment would go. But God heard that. And when I was 22, I was out over Streatham High Street. Someone gave me a leaflet, which I don't remember. I vaguely remember taking it, putting it in my bag, forgot about it. And I think it was about a year later I found it, because I had a fear of dying. And I kept thinking, oh, what happens to you when you die? Oh, I don't like the thought of it. And then I was searching for something, found this leaflet. And as I read it, it was like, God, you are real. I was upstairs, read the leaflet, and I said, Jesus, I want to follow you. I don't know how to do it, but I'm going to do it. And I know you've made sure I found this leaflet. I ran downstairs to Paul, who was not a Christian, and said, I'm going to go to church tomorrow. And he just thought I'd gone a little bit mad. But I went to church the next day, and there was somebody there who recognized me from when I was a kid. And he said, I remember you. And he said my name, and he said he kept a register of kids who used to come along, and he used to pray through it. And so I was one of them kids. And he said, why are you here today? And I said, I don't know. I found a leaflet and I had to come to church. And I never looked back. That was over 40 years ago. I knew I'd found what I'd been looking for.
Wow, what a wonderful story. So growing up in the 60s, tell us a bit about what life was like in your home then. You said no one else was Christian, no one else went to church. So you just took yourself off to a Sunday school each week as a child, did you? Just off your own back? That's a very different, like you said, very different day and age, or very different to perhaps how many people would do things. When you describe your childhood and upbringing, and particularly with regards to your family's attitude towards faith, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, I grew up in South London, Greenwich, and I went to Meridian School. And there was round near where I live, near Maze Hill Station, there was a little Salvation Army there. And I must have only been about 6 or 7, but on a Sunday afternoon, you were allowed to go on your own. So my mum must have said, you can go to the Sunday school. I remember walking on my own. It was weird, because you wouldn't do that to kids now, but that's how it was then. And I remember the people there were so kind. They was always kind. And you always remember when you're a kid who was kind to you, and you always remember who weren't very nice to you. And I remember at the Sunday school at the Salvation Army, they were really kind. And but my family, no, they were proper working class family. And No, they didn't. No one talked about Jesus. The only time my mum talked about Jesus was sometimes if I'd done something wrong, she'd say, God will punish you. And I remember just thinking, oh, is that what God's like? Because that's what you know and that's what you hear.
Yeah, yeah. No, I hear people today use Santa a bit like that at Christmas, don't they?
Yeah,
Behave yourself or Santa won't give you
yeah,
presents. And that's sometimes how we feel about God, isn't it? Like growing
yeah,
up thinking, oh, he is just this headmaster
yeah.
who's a useful tool for parents to get their kids to behave and put the fear of God into them. Yeah, amazing testimony or kind of example of the importance and value of children's work in churches as well.
Yeah, oh, it is because it is teach a child in the way they'll go, and when they're old, they'll not depart from it. So my family then moved out to Kent about 1969, 1970, and I had a friend there who took me to Sunday school there, and that's the one I went to when I found that leaflet when I was older. It was the one in Wilmington in Kent.
Well, I love what you said about as children, you remember those people that show you kindness. Yeah, and we forget that actually. As for kids, they don't have much power or authority, and so they are just at the whim of adults a lot of the time, having very little decision making. And so, to be an adult in a church, to make the decision to show an interest in, to speak kindly to children as a intentionally knowing that through doing things like that you're planting seeds in children's hearts, aren't you? They, like you said, they never forget those people, and at some point they'll ask, why were those people different, or why were they kind?
Yeah, oh, definitely. And that's why, I work in a school and I remember that every day. Every day when I walk to school, I pray on the way to school. Jesus, help me to love you with all my heart, all my mind, all my soul, all my strength, and help me to love others, um, love others as myself, And I every day I pray that, and because kids at school where I work, you just don't know what goes on with them at home because kids mask stuff. But I always pray, Jesus, who needs me today? And God will lead you to a child, and you can tell by their face or their body language something's not right. And like you say, they have no control over that. You have to do as you're told as a kid. And if you come from strict parents, you don't have a voice or you don't have a say, do you? You just have to do as you're told. And yeah, so I really do believe, and my prayer is that there'll be many great men and women of God from my time at that school. So it might not happen while I'm still alive, but that is my prayer that they will go on to do great things.
That's amazing. I think anyone working in a school, particularly as a Christian in school, there's always that dual vision you've got to have. Like in the moment, we're just caring about today. We're going to help you get past. We can help you learn to read this or pass that exam or test, whatever it is. There's that like we want to help you today. But like you said, there's this conscious awareness that I'm also wanting to deposit seeds of who you're going to become. That I'm getting to play a part in forming and shaping you for the future. And yeah, one of the things I'm really looking forward to talking about is your work as a TA in a school for over 20 years, and all the things that you've seen God do there. So we're going to come on to talk about that, because I think helping Christians to see the significance of what they do day in, day out, and how God can use them to bring His kingdom and etc. is really key. But let's just stay with this journey then. So far, you're a child going to Sunday school. Your parents have moved out to Kent, so you lost touch with the first school. And then what did you just kind of I guess as a child growing up, just stop going to church? You haven't really got the encouragement from your family to keep going because they're not believers.
Well, I think my mum was quite strict, and I always felt a little bit misunderstood. And so as I grew up, I was always looking for excitement. So when I went to the Sunday school, I enjoyed going there we moved to Wilmington, but everyone there went with their parents. So if they ever did, well, they used to call it a sword drill. They read some verses and you had to find them. I had no idea. So I didn't stand a chance. I'd never find the verse. The kids whose parents go along, they go every week, they would find it straight away. And sometimes I used to think, oh, I wish I had family here with me, but it was just me. And then, yeah, I become a teenager and I started, I had a boyfriend who had a car, and then, you'd be out and about. And then I decided to leave home and I moved up to London to live with my aunt and uncle. Then I got my own flat with some, shared a flat. And so I was just out every night, just partying, the latest nightclubs. Somebody was always a member somewhere, so you could go. And I worked in the King's Road and I worked in Knightsbridge for a little while. So it was just fun. I loved it. And I thought, this is fun. But I always had that in my head, fear of death. And I always knew something was missing, but I didn't know what it was. I used to think there has to be more to life than this. And I think the fear of death came from my mum because her dad died when she was about 15. And in them days, they brought the body home, put it in the front room, and it stayed there till the funeral. And I think she had a real fear of death. And then I must have inherited it. But the minute I gave my life to Jesus, that went. The fear of death went straight away. God just broke it.
Wow. Yeah, because I mean, you've had your own health scares in recent years as well. You were diagnosed with aggressive cancer just shortly after um, being diagnosed with a heart condition, I believe, a serious heart condition. And so I know we're jumping around a bit in your timeline, but let's come to that. How does knowing Jesus help you when you got news like that? And if you wouldn't mind, like this, perhaps describe how that came about and the journey you've been on since then.
Well, life was just going as normal, absolutely fine. And then one day I was at home with Paul one evening, and just out of the blue, suddenly this doom came over me like, oh, I'm really ill. And I thought, am I having a heart attack? Am I having a stroke? I didn't know. But in those seconds, I remember saying, Jesus, am I dying? Am I actually dying? And then I started saying, I'm really sorry for anything I've done wrong that I've not said sorry for yet. I remember in seconds, I had seconds, and I remember saying that. And then I screamed out, and Paul was like, didn't know what was going on because I was a bit unconscious. But then the paramedics come and they didn't really know what it was. So fast forward about 18 months later, and they found out it was something to do with my heart. So they said it just an irregular kind of heartbeat thing. And they said, we're just to rule everything out, we'll do an MRI. So they did an MRI on me, and the consultant said, it's most probably nothing. I'm just being cautious. So did an MRI. He said, you're here within 2 weeks. Within about a day, I got a phone call while I was working to say, Denise, you've got a very serious heart condition. And it's one of them ones that footballers can get and athletes where you can drop down dead. It's very clear, and that's what you've got. And I'm going to speak to my colleagues, but I believe you need to have a defibrillator put in. So suddenly I had to deal with that, because you think you're going to be healthy till you're about 85 and then Jesus will take you one day. And I didn't feel, I felt normal. And so it was really scary. I didn't want a bad heart. And it was like, God, I'm really frightened about this. So they were dealing with all that. This was in January 2023. And so they were sort of deciding they were going to get the defib in quite quick and whatever. And then that was January. In February, I just didn't feel very well. And I didn't know what it was. I thought, I just feel really tired, really unwell. So I went to the doctors, and she said, I think we'll send you for a scan, see if there's anything wrong. It could be kidney stones, could be. Anyway, went for a scan at the A&E. And soon as they saw it, she said, I think you might have cancer. And I was thinking, "No, I can't have cancer. I've got this heart condition." Anyway, they did loads of tests. They had me in the very next day from morning till night. They did all these tests. I did have cancer. So then there was a panic going on to get the defib in, because if you have to have chemo and it's aggressive chemo, it affects your heart. So my life was all up in the air, but I just kept thinking, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will not fear, because fear was trying to get in badly. because I was thinking, I don't know if I'm going to be around. I don't know if I've got long. And then I kept saying, Jesus, give me another 20 years. I don't feel like I've finished what you want me to do. And I want you to use me. All the things you've done in my life, I don't want it to all end now, unless you say so, and then I can't argue with you. So yeah, I had to go, I had the defib put in, and then a couple of weeks later, I had to start chemo, and it was grueling. After one lot of chemo, I said, Paul, I seriously can't do this anymore. I know where I'm going. I'm going to heaven. I actually can't do it. And he said, you have to. And I said, I seriously can't. But then somebody, Angela Kem, came round and she prayed for me, and fear had got in. Fear had got in the middle of the night. I remember being really fearful sometimes when everyone was asleep and I'm laying there awake and I couldn't sleep. Fear got in. She just prayed for me. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I did do all the chemo and it was horrible, but it was okay. And God used me there to chat to people. He gave me people there to chat to and pray with. And I still keep in touch with one of the ladies there. So, yeah. And I've come through it and I've got the all clear and I've got a bit of hair now. So, you know, so it was suffering and it was horrible. But, I feel different from it. I don't feel the same person anymore. So, it is tough going through suffering, and I wouldn't recommend it to people, but in a weird kind of way, you come through it different, you come through it stronger. And I know, Jesus, you will not let me down. I know you won't.
Yeah, the Lord does use suffering for in our discipleship a lot more than we often talk about. I think, it says in Hebrews, doesn't it, that he learnt obedience through what he suffered. So even the Son of God was matured in some way through suffering. And, for all of our discipleship programs that we put on at church and, classes and teachings on growing as a Christian, actually the thing that seems to make the biggest impact is those moments where we're suddenly out of control and we're having to go through things that we can't avoid. What are some of? I'd love to hear more a bit about. So it must be just a horrible moment when your life is just flipped upside down. One day you're one thing, the next day you're hearing that news about the the serious heart condition. Just yeah, describe to us, if you wouldn't, like what that feels like, and then some of the things you talk about fear. What does it mean to fight fear? What are some of the things that you've learned?
Well, I think the main thing I felt was so overwhelmed. I couldn't take anything more in because there was loads surrounding doing all the heart stuff, appointments here, appointments there. And then when the month later it was the cancer, I had to have every test going, and some of the tests were horrible. And I used to have to say, Jesus, you've got to help me. This is too hard to do. And then he gave me the strength to do it. And yeah, it was weird. I remember when they were putting the defibrillator in, you have to be awake and there's cameras everywhere. And they would say, we'll give you a little bit of a sedative to calm you down. And I'd always tell a little lie and say, I think I need some more. I don't think it's working properly. They said, we can give you a little bit more. Because I remember thinking, I don't want to panic. I kept saying, Jesus, you are with me in this room. You are actually here. You're not in heaven. You are here with me as I'm going through this. And there was one particular night when I woke up in the night and they'd give me all these drugs with the chemo and it messed with my head. So that was what was hard because I found it hard to pray because my mind was all over the place and that was scary then. And I was like, Jesus, all I could say was help. So I held my hand out and was saying, Jesus, help, please help. Will you hold my hand? And I just kept saying, help, help. And then I fell asleep. And then in the morning when I woke up, somebody had rung me and said, Denise, how you doing? And I said, oh, I wasn't that good, really. I'm really struggling, but I feel a bit better this morning. She then described one of my daughter-in-laws that night had phoned around some people and said, I know Denise is struggling with this chemo and all the drugs. Is there anyone could be able to pray through the night, which I had no idea about. And they did. People were breastfeeding in the night or having to get up. Some people gave up an hour. So God, when I said, help, will you hold my hand, Jesus? I believe he did, because he got people to pray for me in the night. That's how personal Jesus is, you know? And so it is suffering, but it's like Jesus is very close to you as well. And the devil will try and get in your head and tell you he's not, look what's happened to you now. But God is there. He really is. And other people carried me when I didn't have the capacity to keep praying, only things like help or Jesus, hold my hand. Other people were praying for me. God made sure there was a very big prayer support. And yeah, he's so kind, isn't he? But we don't know this till we go through it. And it's when it's actually happening.
Yeah, and it's lovely that even just your kind of honesty in describing, like when you are that discombobulated, you can't pray, you can't do lots other than say help. And that's where you realize Jesus doesn't help you because of the strength of your faith or because of the eloquence of your praying. He helps you because he loves you, and he has a whole family of brothers and sisters and people around that can intercede for you when you're weak. Always reminds me of the story of the lame man being lowered to Jesus' feet by his friends. You think there is real need for that. Yeah, how do you think it's helped strengthen your relationship with Jesus? Do you feel like yeah, you described it as changing you, or things feel different now on the other side? What are some of the ways that you think the Lord's used this to grow you as a Christian?
Well, I've always been close to Jesus. When Jesus found me through that leaflet, he became my best friend. And I really learned what it was to have Jesus as your best friend. It was not complicated. It was very simple. I just knew he was real. And from the word go, there was a night when I first became a Christian that I was just praying and just didn't quite know if I was doing it right or whatever, and then the power of God came on me. And I remember seeing tongues of fire, but I didn't know what they were. It's only when I heard about Acts that I described to someone and said, do people still see tongues of fire nowadays? Because I thought, don't want them to think I'm a bit mad. And they said, well, that you might do in other countries, where there's a big revival or something. Yeah, people might. And I thought, I have seen that with my own eyes. And I think it was the power of God. He filled me so much with the Holy Spirit. It was almost like you're mine. It was like I was stamped and you won't be going anywhere. Because I got bored really easy. So I didn't stick to anything for more than 5 minutes. But it was almost God had to do that. You're mine. And it was like stamped with Jesus. And so I've always known Jesus really, really close. So I would say, yeah, my faith did grow through being ill, but it also was strong anyway.
No, it's lovely. I love how you describe that. I guess you'd call that your baptism in the Holy Spirit. Would you? That
Yeah.
initial moment of power encounter with God like that. It's so beautiful. And even the way you describe just a friendship with Jesus coming from a background where you weren't versed, you couldn't win the sword drills and the kids' works, you didn't have it drummed into you at home. And I think sometimes people in your situation, I was one of them, I guess, come to church from a non-Christian home, you feel a bit like not an imposter, but like, oh, I don't know any of these songs. People make these jokes about books they read as a kid, and I don't know any of those references. And so you feel like there's a lot you've got to do to learn when you enter the church, particularly in your 20s, as we both did as it happened. And I sometimes meet people who I think they struggle with that. I love how you described and said, well, it's not complicated. It's just a friendship with Jesus. Could you kind of say anything to those people? Perhaps you meet them in your ministry, no doubt, people who do, I don't think overcomplicate it, but they wrestle with that. Oh, I don't know enough. Haven't I don't know what I'm trying to say, but just kind of any suggestions or comments you'd have on trying to encourage people to cultivate what you call that friendship with Jesus?
Well, I think you come as you are. So whoever you are, when you come into church, you come as you are, and you have to be yourself. Because the church we went into, it was really middle class. It was all middle class people. And then there was me and Paul. We didn't speak like them, we didn't act like them, our backgrounds were different. And then part of you thinks, oh, do I have to be like them? But I just felt I just had to be myself, because you can't keep up that facade for long, can you? You have to be yourself. So I think it encouraged a lot of people that we were who we were. And so now when people come into our church, even if they've still got things they're doing they shouldn't be doing, you think Jesus deals with things one thing at a time. You can't change someone overnight. People didn't change me and Paul overnight. It took a while, and nobody was judged us. So I always say to people, just be yourself and talk to Jesus like if you was talking to a best friend, and you can tell him anything. Just chit chat with Jesus. Just, first thing in the morning, oh Jesus, I'm really tired today. Gonna have to help me through today because I didn't sleep very well last night. And I just chat to him, and at work, if I can't do something, and then I say, Jesus, help me. You need to help me because I don't know what I'm doing here. And he always does. Somewhere or other, you work it out and he'll help you. So that's what I would say to people coming into church. Yeah.
That's really good. And I mean, raising 5 kids, your life, no doubt, probably is, but certainly was very, very busy, probably with very little free time to yourself. Running, rushed off your feet, running all over the place, working, raising the family. Um, I know. As you're sharing that, it reminded me, of course, I forget, who I'm talking to. I've spoken to Paul Brown, the Paul Brown, author of Invisible Divides, but you're the one who's in so many of those stories as well. Of course.
Yeah.
And there was wonderful stories in that book that involved the pair of you, where God miraculously provided and showed himself practically time and time again, didn't he? In the way that, you've developed a friendship with him, and he's proving it in your life in the way that he's, teaching you, leading you, gifting you, providing for you. Is there any standout moments or things that come to mind just to encourage people in what a friendship with Jesus looks like? I was thinking of that time that Paul described, a moment on holiday where you put lots of money in an offering that you didn't have, or something. Anything like that comes to mind that you can encourage us with?
Yeah. Well, we were going on holiday, and we didn't have loads of money when we had 5 kids. I didn't work, so we didn't have masses of money. But the little bit of money we did have for the holiday, I felt God say, give it away. So I said to Paul, God said, give it away. He said, oh, are you sure? So I said, yeah, he did. So anyway, we gave it away quickly, and then we just carried on, got ready for the holiday. And as we're driving along, Paul said, are you sure God said, give it away? Because I've only got enough petrol to get there and not to get back. So I said, yeah, God did say that. So we got on holiday, and we had no money. And when we got down there, we stayed in somebody's house, and we'd stayed there the year before, and they'd left all treats for us. This year they said, we thought we'd clear the fridge so you can put your stuff in it. We're thinking, oh, we ain't got no stuff to put in it, we got no money. But we just kept praying, and we got by on the Saturday. On the Sunday we went to church, and we thought someone will come up. I've heard from God to give you this money. We don't know who you are, but God said give you this. Nothing. We got home, and then I kept saying, Jesus, you're never going to let us down. I know you won't. And the kids were like, can we do this? Can we do that? And we said, no, we haven't got any money yet. And we explained to them what had happened. We said, right, come on, put some worship music on. And we just praised God. We're going to worship Jesus. He's not going to let us down. And I went out in the hallway to look for something, and there was an envelope there with Paul and Denise written on it. And we hadn't told people we didn't have any money. And in this envelope was some cash for us, just all this cash. And it was like, God's done it. He's done it. And all the kids were dancing. Yeah, he's done it. And then the next day, somebody knocked on the door. They found out that we were staying at Steve Braden's house down in Sussex. And he said, God spoke to me in church and I was too shy. But God kept telling me, I found out where you were staying and I've bought this round, some more money. And then a few days later, somebody knocked, Steph Liston was coming on holiday and he said, oh, someone in City Hope said they were gutted. They missed you before you went on holiday. They wanted to bless you as a family. They said, if you know where they're staying, could you drop this round to them? And there was more money. So God gave us loads more than we gave away. So yeah, God doesn't let you down. But he didn't part the Red Sea, did he, till they dipped their toes in. So we literally had to go on holiday with nothing. One of our kids was a baby and we was on the last nappy and it was like, Jesus, we are desperate. And then the money turned up. So we said, right, let's go and get some nappies and go and get some food, you know.
Wow.
So yeah,
What?
God.
Why do you just as you reflect on that moment? Why do you think the Lord asked you to put that money in before you went? What was going on in your life at the time as a family?
Well, I think God could have provided that money without us giving it away, but it was almost God wanted to show us something that we never forgot. And through that story, some of our kids have had to do things like that in their own married lives, and they've never forgotten it. So they've got the faith to do stuff like that. You know, one of our sons, when he got married, he didn't have the money to pay all the bills on the wedding day until they got through the service. Because I kept saying, God won't let you down. He's never let us down. The day of the wedding, there was no money. And we're talking a good few thousand. And then he literally had to walk down the aisle just as the wedding was over. I remember the whole wedding standing there saying, God, do not embarrass him and his wife. Do not embarrass them. I kept thinking of the wine, turning the water into wine at the wedding. And then as we went to go and get the pictures done in the park, the photographer was there and he came up to me, our son, and said, the money's come in. Someone's just given me a huge check. The money's in. I was like, yes, the wedding starts now. I can enjoy it now. So our kids have learned something from it. So God does that so that you step out and then he says, right, now I'll do it.
Oh, I love this, Denise. It's so inspiring. It's just such an important reminder that the Lord doesn't just call us friends, He actually wants to be friends. And that does mean that we've got to engage with Him through the everyday stuff of life. And part of I think of the commands in the law about pass these things on to your children. Like that doesn't mean sit down and make sure they've read the same books that you've read or teach them lessons. It's actually pass on this living faith of a friendship with God to your children, that they know that, I mean, in the Israelites' case, that they know I'm the God who parted the sea and delivered you, because that's ultimately what God wants. I think He wants that level of relationship with His creation, with us. What an absolute treat. And to describe the impact, to kind of imagine the impact that must have had on your family. And I love, as you're talking as well, another thing that's just implicit, assumed in a lot of this, is the way that you and Paul together are on the same page. You're both praying. You're both, he's trusting you. Are you sure God said, let's give that money away? I love that kind of dynamic of team together. Are there any just comments you'd be able to, kind of advice you'd be able to share on how to develop and cultivate, we might say, a Christian marriage where you are praying together? Do you pray together regularly, or how do you share your faith as a team together in marriage? Any just comments on that?
Well, when the kids were young, Paul was quite busy, like working in the day before he worked for the church, and then he'd be busy most evenings with church stuff. So as soon as the kids was in bed, that's when I used to pray in the evenings. I used to think, right, that's my time to pray. As soon as they're in bed, so all evening, that was my time. We have had times when we prayed together, especially when I was ill. We would sort of pray together, or Paul would pray for me. Or I think as a couple, I can tell if Paul's stressed. And I say, Paul, you don't need to be stressed about that. So God gives one of you much more faith than the other one at particular times. So, if Paul was sort of struggling with something, I would be like, no, come on, Paul, you can do this, come on. And I would pray for him, Jesus, come on, give him the strength he needs for this. And then Paul did that for me when I was really ill. And I didn't realize how much it affected Paul until after it was all over. And it had really affected Paul, me being ill, but because he'd been strong through it all. And he said, oh, I thought I was going to lose you, you know. I said, no, not yet. You can put your black suit away, not yet, you know. But yeah. So I think well, no, we don't sit and pray together every day. Paul does it his way, I do it mine. And now I don't pray in the evenings. I tend to get up early and pray in the mornings. So that's my time now. It kind of changes through different seasons, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
I like that as well because I think sometimes as married couples, I think many married couples who are Christians feel like they're failing because they're not having devotionals together, they're not singing songs together, they're not praying together, and it's great when you can do those things as a couple. But I think what I'm hearing from you is actually it's Jesus has a friendship with each of you individually, and then individually you're then drawing on your friendship with Jesus individually to help strengthen and encourage one another in the home and in your marriage so that you can be a stronger team together. Is that the sort of is that the sort of thing you described? Like, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And obviously when there's something really you know, we need to pray about something, oh, straight away, we'll get together and pray. We'll find time when we've been through tough times. We will get together and pray together, get on our knees. You know, God, you got to show up here, you know, when we've been through some things. And, you know, so then we'd be praying together then. So it's a bit of both, really. You know, we do pray together, but
It's
we
not a
pray.
technique, is it? It's a relationship. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh well, Denise, let's just come on then to um, talk about your work and what I guess. Firstly, we might just say why is it that you do the work you do? Is it something that God led you into? Is it just something you started doing as a matter of convenience? And then what are some of the ways that God's given you faith and vision for the work that you're doing? So I guess first of all, you start by just reminding us all what you do, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, well, I'm a TA in a little one form entry primary school. And it is a Church of England school, but it's very different now from when I first started working there. So God, I I didn't plan to go to work. I was in the playground one day and the deputy head teacher said, Mrs. Brown, would you be able to help out and be a spare pair of hands? Because when the receptions class start, they're all coming in one go. And we thought it'd be nice to, and we thought you'd be quite good. So I said, oh, yeah, okay. So I did it for a week. And I remember thinking, oh, it's quite full on. And then the teacher said, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do without you next week. So I said, okay, I'll do another week for you. I did another week. And then I thought, oh, after that, I can catch up with what I need to do. And then the head teacher came and found me, said, we'd love to offer you a job. I said, well, I don't really know what I'm doing. She said, we can train you up. That's fine. So they gave me a job, and that's how it started. It was sort of handed to me on a plate, really. And yeah, and so doing the job, I really loved it because every day is different. And I remember just sort of having little ideas of things that could change the school. And it's just little thoughts, but then they were taken on board and then we did do them. So, for instance, my head teacher, there was a class that was really all different individuals, and it was such a hard work class. And she said, Denise, I'm pulling my hair out. I don't know what to do with them. So I said, how about if somebody goes in and prays for them every morning to start afresh? Every day is a new day. It's like a clean slate. So they don't have to feel guilty about yesterday. Whatever happened yesterday, let's put it behind them and we start again. So she said, would you start doing it today then? And I was thinking, I didn't mean me. I thought somebody, you know. But anyway, I had to go and do it. So I just started praying for that class, and I'd put a Christian song on just to calm as they all walked in, and then I would pray for them all and just tell them every day is a new day. And And then I said to any of the kids, is there anyone here who would like to pray for the class? And a few kids said, yeah. So I said, right, come and pray for your friends then, that you will have a good day today. And so they started doing that. And then my head teacher happened to walk through and she heard some of the children praying. And she was like, wow, kids' prayers, you know. So then in assembly, she said after assembly, would any of the children who prayed in year 5, it was at the time, would like to come and pray after assembly? Well, that was about 15 years ago. That is the culture of the school now. Any kid from reception to year 6 knows how to pray. So at the end of assembly, she calls out about 5 or 6 kids and they pray. And that is at the culture of our school. So I work in reception, so I teach every child when they start how to pray. And they're such simple little prayers, but then they're confident enough to do it in assembly sometimes. So sometimes these little 4-year-olds put their hand up to pray in assembly, and they might just go out and say, Dear Jesus, thank you for my friends. Amen. But it's like to pray in front of over 200 people and all the staff. It's a big deal for a little kid, but it starts there. And then so any class would know how to pray. So, yeah, so that's become the culture of the school that kids pray. But it was just a little throwaway comment. How about if someone says, let's start afresh today, every day is a new day? And most teachers use that saying in the classes.
So you've become the like the prayer chaplain, the prayer teacher for 15 years of children going through a primary school.
Well, I just think it's important for children to know how to pray. And I tell them that because I say, when you're grown up, you know, sometimes things get tough or, you know, you need to know Jesus. And even as little children, I tell them, you know, when your mummy and daddies are in bed and some of you might be frightened of the dark or feel a bit scared in the night. And I said, hands up who and loads of hands go up. And I say, but Jesus doesn't go to sleep. God doesn't go to sleep. You can talk to him like you would a best friend. So I teach them that. You can talk to Jesus. You can say, I'm a bit scared of the dark, Jesus. Will you help me? And I said, he will, because he hears everything you say and he'll help you. So I teach them all these little things from age 4. And I say, you don't have to be frightened. I was scared as a little girl of all them things, and nobody told me. So I'm going to tell you, so you don't have to be frightened. And often when we're doing RE or doing something, they'll say, I was scared of this or scared of that. And my teacher would say, well, how did you deal with it? And they say, I asked Jesus to help me. When I was in bed, I asked him, and I think, oh, they're applying what I'm teaching them. So it makes me think, oh God, you're at work in this school, you know.
Ah, it's incredible, Denise.
Yeah, so it's
I,
only very simple things.
but
And
I
that's
can
why,
hear just the love with which you're able to talk to the children, you know, bringing God's heart for these little, dear little ones. Jesus loves the little ones. We can see that in the Gospels, don't we? And the way that even the way you're describing the way you teach them, you know, there's a love for the children that seems to express some of God's heart. And even that statement, like, I think it's important that children grow up learning how to pray. I think, yeah, it can be so easy to overlook that. To train a human how to talk to God is huge. That's what we're made for. We're made for friendship with God. We believe that. We say that God wants to know you, and so actually to see that as part of your life's mission or mandate, I don't know, would you say that to help people get to know God and to talk with God?
well, it's so simple to teach them that. It's because people tend to think, oh, this is complicated. Well, it sometimes is when you're talking to adults and they've got all barriers up over the years. But if you're teaching a child, because some of them won't be getting that from home, so no one else is going to teach them. And so it's just so important and it's quite a responsibility. But you know, Jesus is with me when I do it. So when we talk about stories in the Bible, I'll use all little props and use little figures and make it fun. And then when you recap the following week, they've remembered it. So I think you're remembering these stories as well. And I really enjoy doing it.
There's some important principles, I think, about the way you're approaching and thinking about your work and your involvement in the school that anybody can apply to their workplaces.
Oh, definitely, because a lot of the staff there, I mean, they would say they've got a bit of faith, but lots of them, I would say, aren't Christians and don't go to church. But I can't think of any staff there that have never asked me to pray for them at some point. Something's happened and they would ask me to pray for them. And, you know, I I love doing that. It's just so normal now. Because if they tell me something, I say, right, let me pray for you. And they just know that that's what I'll do. It's not weird. That's what I do. And so I'm not looked at as a weirdo. It's just, I think it brings peace to the school. So when people are having tests for, maybe they're not well and they've got to go and have some important tests. And I'll say, I'm going to pray for you. Let me pray for you now. So children see me with my hand on someone and they'll just be going off somewhere and it's just normal in the school. My head teacher will come and find me and there'll be some very big thing going on that she needs pray, and we just pray and I say, let me pray for you here and now. So we'll be standing in the lobby and we just pray. She'll bow her head and we pray, and kids will be again going off to somewhere where they're going. It's just normal in the school.
Wow. Do you see your role there? Do you think of yourself like a chaplain for the school?
I wouldn't say like a chaplain. I think it's just being Jesus every day. It's stopping for the one. So it could be someone on the way to school, could be someone in the school that day, it could be one of the staff, could be a child, it could be one of the parents. I'll be chatting to one of the parents. It's just whoever it is. Jesus shows you who the one is. And sometimes it could be two, it could be three. But I always think aim for the one and pray about who is it today, and then you will definitely have one person. But if you don't do that in the morning, you tend to forget and the day goes by and you haven't done anything about it. So I think everyone can stop for the one wherever they work. Even if you don't work and you go down the school, you're a mum who goes to the school, or you go to the shops, you see the same people. You only have to smile at them and chat to them, and before you know it, with Christians, people tend to tell you their business because there's something about you they trust. And then you can say, I'm going to pray for you. I'm a Christian. I'm going to pray for you. You know, it's just comes, and I think if I can do it, anyone can do it. I seriously think that anyone can do it if I can do it.
Well, I love that phrase. I think I remember talking with Paul and he used that phrase as well, stopping for the one. Is that quite a mantra of the Brown household?
Well, I think it's just something. Because if you think you've got to stop for everyone, it's a bit overwhelming, isn't it? So it's easier to just think one, and there'll be one. God will put someone across your path. I was going to the hospital the other day, and as I walked past this bench, there was a girl sitting on it, a young girl, really smartly dressed, and she was crying. And I thought, I can't walk past. So I stopped and I thought, this is the one. And I said, are you okay? And she said, no, I'm not. And I explained to her, I said, look, I couldn't walk past you. I couldn't. If that was my daughter, I'd want someone to stop for her. Anyway, she then explained her partner is so mean to her. And she said, I can't, it is destroying me. And I said, have you got family here? And she said, no, my family are in Canada. I'm here alone. But my mum is coming over in a few days. And I said, well, if that was my daughter, I'd want someone to sit with her. And I said, I'm a Christian. I said, so I'm the right person who stopped for you now. Can I pray for you? And she said, yes. I just prayed for her. And then we chatted for a bit. And then I give her a big cuddle and she gave me a big cuddle back. And I said, you've got some things you need to change in your life. And I'd pray, Jesus, help her to make some changes. Things that aren't good in her life, let her make some changes. And then I said, I hope you have the best time with your mum. And we both went our separate ways, but she went off smiling. And I went off thinking, Jesus, you cared about that girl, you know? So it was nothing complicated. It was very simple. We both went our ways.
Oh, I love it, and I love it because it's something similar when I talk to Paul as well. Just your, as a couple and as individuals, just I I guess you just call it your love for people, but your willingness to share Jesus's heart with people. Um, and I mean, there's so much I could ask you about that because I mean, no, so many of us listen to that and think, oh, I'd love to be like that. I'd love to be that kind of person that cares like that for someone. And sometimes people's busyness stops them doing it, but sometimes it's people's fearfulness of making a scene or of looking awkward. And I'd love to just get some more of your comments. You know, you talked about when you're diagnosed with cancer, the fear had got in. So you're someone who's familiar with the power of fear. Um, you said that your friend Angela came around and prayed with you and helped you process that. So how did you process fear? How do you process fear? How do you ensure that fear doesn't become a barrier that stops you stopping for the one, so to speak?
You just have to face it. You just have to step out and do it, you know? So you have to face your fear. And but there'll always be something in your head saying you can't do it, you can't do it. But you can. I mean, when again talking about the Red Sea, when they came up to the Red Sea, they must have been fearful. They must have been, thought we're all going to drown, you know. David and Goliath, he must have thought, if this stone misses, that's it, mate, I'm done. But you have to face your fear because that's when God shows up. And I've learned that because where fear used to have such a grip on me, um, God broke it. And so then you have to walk into the fear and then it is not fearful anymore. So for instance, it's a silly little thing, but I would never go downstairs when it was dark. So once the lights was off, I would never go downstairs. And there was one night God woke me up in the night and said, I want you to go downstairs, go and worship me. And I thought, but I don't go downstairs when all the lights are off. Paul turns them off. He's the last one who comes up, and I wouldn't go down till the morning. But I just thought, I know my sheep hear my voice. I'd heard God, so I thought, right, okay, God, I will. So I went downstairs, I put the lights on, went downstairs, put some music on quietly and just worship God. And God just broke fear of the dark, getting up in the night and fear of the dark. And then it was like, oh, I can do that now. If I want to drink a water in the night and I've forgotten to take one, I'll get up in the night. That I can do that. Now was a few years ago I did this, but it was like God thought, no more. You need to get up in you can't be scared of the dark. So it's facing fear. So it's the same with talking to people. Just ask people questions. They're very willing to talk about themselves. So you just ask people questions. How are you? And then it puts people at ease. And then you can just connect with them. Just ask them some questions.
That's really good. Yeah, I think as Christians, we do have the Spirit in us. And so that means that we do have the love of Christ for people in us, don't we? So it's allowing ourselves to feel God's heart for people because every person that we come across, the Spirit of God really loves them and is interested in them. And he's there in you wanting to reach out to engage with them. And sometimes it's just the case that us as Christians need to be willing hands and feet to say, yeah, I'm gonna listen to that. You know, we talk about deep calling out to deep. I'm gonna listen to that deep, still small voice maybe that says, go and do this. That instinct. I don't know. Like I was reading John Mark Comer's book on the way of Jesus, and he says that every one of us has what he calls an inner monk or an inner nun, someone that wants to be with God and in God's presence. If you're a Christian, you have the Spirit in you, which means you have the one in you wanting you to pray. He's calling you out to pray. And we often just need to learn to partner with that, to actually put something in our diary or, to get up out of bed and to go do it. And I think it's probably a very similar experience to what you're describing when it comes to loving people. It's God's heart for people. Um,
Well, I think, especially when I was really ill and I thought, I don't know if this chemo is going to work because it doesn't always. And I thought if it doesn't, then maybe I haven't got long. But I kept saying I wanted to finish well. And so it made me really see, I don't want to get to heaven and I want Jesus to say, well done, good and faithful servant. I don't want to get there and think, I had this opportunity, I didn't bother. I had this one, this one. I was too busy with everything else. It made me really see we don't have long, whether we're ill or whether it's just life. We don't, like saying you live to 80, that goes like that. And so we don't, it's not long to be around. And I just think I want to do what Jesus wanted me to do while I'm here. And so I just think it's important. We're not here just for the ride, are we? We're not here just to go to church, worship Jesus all the time, which is lovely and it's great. We're here to do a job, to be his hands and feet. And that really hit home when I was ill. That no, we can't waste time. And I feel very challenged about mobile phones. They're such a distraction, aren't they? And you can pick up your phone and think, I'm going to read my Bible on it and look at this app, Rick Warren or whatever it is you want to look at. Then something will ping, and then it'll be, oh, I need to reply to that. And then before you know it, I'm on Instagram looking at, and then you think, ah. So I think we have to be ruthless with our time, don't we? And things like phones, I think there's not many people who aren't distracted by their phone, because everything you could need is on that phone. And it is such a distraction. And I think if you can lose an hour on your phone, everyone can spend time with Jesus, everyone. And I think we have to just be ruthless about it, because phones are around now. There's nothing we can do about it. But we've got to be in charge of them, not them in charge of us, because I could get really distracted by my phone. But then I think, no, I don't know how long we've got, and we want to do what God's called us to do.
I mean, you in that word distraction, it reminds me of what you shared about your testimony, that as a teenager going out partying, you did have those questions about life. You were interested in those things, but to the outside observer of your life, you'd have just seen a young girl going out partying all the time. And at the stage that you were at, it seems that you were using just partying and going to clubs and new experiences as a distraction from engaging with those other questions. And so even how the Lord saved you, baptized you in the Spirit, and I can't remember the language you used, but you talked about him kind of just sealing it and like, right, you're not going anywhere now. I've got your attention. And do you think in that moment it kind of gave you a taste of something better that has helped you fight or helped you maintain like a commitment to fighting distractions because you found something else? Is that a fair kind of telling of how things went?
Well, once you've had a real taste of Jesus, nothing else will match that. Nothing will match that when you've been in the presence of God. And it's hard to put into words, isn't it? Because when you know God, you know him. When you know Jesus, you know him. When you feel the Holy Spirit, you know. And there's nothing that is as good as that. Now, the devil will lie to you, get in your head, oh, do this, watch this film tonight or do this. There's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes we can go too far that way and Jesus gets left behind a little bit. But nothing in life matches up to being in the presence of God. It's just, you forget everything. You're in his presence and it just changes you. Jesus when you're in the presence of God, he changes you and you come away. You don't even know what he's doing sometimes, but you come away different. You think differently. You act differently. It just changes you. So I would say to anyone listening today, if you haven't spent a lot of time with Jesus lately, get back with him again. He's only ever that far away. He's not all cross with you because you haven't spent as much time as you should have done. He's there waiting for you. And the minute you spend time with him, it's like, oh, he's been waiting there for you. He's not gone anywhere. It's us who drift off, isn't it? We sort of veer away a bit.
Yeah, I love it. And, it's so encouraging, Denise. And just, I know it's obviously been a large part of your life's kind of perspective, the way you see the world anyway, but I can see how going through suffering has helped kind of clarify for you, as you said, like, I'm not sure how long I've got left. I'm not sure I might be with him anytime soon. I want to make every moment count. And it's that, as I've been thinking a bit recently, it's about purpose, the things that motivate us. When you've been in ministry for a long time, been a Christian for a long time, what is it that keeps motivating us to keep going? For a lot of people, what motivates them is, more money, more experiences, more holidays. But actually, none of those things ever really fill the hole that we are trying to fill them with, or, hoping that they'll do. But it's seeing our lives through God's perspective, realizing like you're only here once, and you get to know Him, and be a partner of His in the world. That there isn't anything more exciting than that. Nothing else will satisfy like that. And becoming convinced of that, then will just shape the way we see our lives, thinking, no, a successful life isn't one that makes a lot of money, or goes on lots of holidays, or has lots of, read lots of books, or written lots of books, or is really good at this or good at that. A successful life is one where someone has been a friend of Jesus and has helped other people know Jesus through the way that they've lived. Yeah.
It's lovely to see as well. I don't know. I think when you're around people and people know you know Jesus, some people maybe don't like it, but for a lot of people, it gives them a comfort when you're around, because they know that you're someone who is going to care and be kind, and kindness goes a long way, doesn't it? And Jesus makes us kind, doesn't he? Because he was kind, and he makes people kind, and that speaks volumes.
Yeah, well, I mean, you used the word kindness then a few times. So, you talked about that earlier when we talked about children seeing in adults and Christian adults a kindness. And it reminds me of the fruit of the Spirit, that's one of them: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness. And to the Christian, it's, the encouragement that kindness towards others is something that gets produced in the Christian's life. This is the fruit of the Spirit. The Spirit produces a kindness in us, and our job is to stay in the vine, knowing that as we abide in Him, He'll abide in us, and over time we'll bear fruit. Part of that fruit will be a kindness that influences and it has an impact on others. And I just think that the impact that you must have made, not only in the school, in its culture and philosophy, but on the children and on the parents, through being at that school for over 20 years and seeing God do things, must be amazing to consider. Well, Denise, it's been such an encouragement talking to you. You make me want to pray. You make me want to come off the Zoom call and spend time with Jesus, because there's an honesty and a love for God in you that is very contagious and very attractive. Is there anything else on your heart and mind just to leave us with as we draw things to a close?
I just think there was one little story I'd like to tell. And there was a lady once who was one of the mums at the school, and she called out my name for me to stop, but I was going to lunch. And I didn't want to stop because I thought, I've only got an hour. And so I was thinking, I want to go and get a sandwich and come back. But she obviously wanted to talk, and she hadn't been very well, and she wanted to talk. Anyway, I just felt God saying, stop for her. So I did. And when I sat down with her, she started to ask me, she said she's in a lot of pain. She weren't very well. And she was only a young mum. And she said, I said to her about being a Christian, and she said, could I become a Christian now? And I said, yeah, you could. So I sat down with her and we prayed, and she'd give her life to Jesus. And I prayed for the pain she was in. She had something wrong, and it was during lockdown, so she wasn't getting all the appointments that she needed, because there weren't a lot going on. So I prayed for her, and then she said, could I come to your church? And I said, no, it's all closed down at the moment, but we do church online. So I sent a church online every week. And then there was one particular week, and she'd even told people, I've become a Christian. So she definitely had given her life to Jesus. And then there was one week when there was no blue ticks when I'd sent a church. And then I found out the next day that she'd taken her own life. Now, that was really hard to deal with, but I thought that's between her and God. And God must have known what was going on there, but he wanted to make sure she was saved. And I think, what if I'd never stopped that day? Yet we don't know the impact of what we say to people, So I think it's just so important to be aware. A few words with somebody. Sometimes it's just a few words. Sometimes they might, like that lady wanted to give her life to Jesus, but in my mind, I was ready to just walk past it, just hi, keep walking. And I just think that always sticks in my mind because, how many people has God got for us to talk to each day who just need something? It might not be they're ready to give their lives to Jesus, but just something. And they will take that with them and it will be special. God will use it.
Stop for the one. That kind of mantra of the Brown household, it seems to be both for Paul and for Denise. Once we'd finished recording, Denise shared with me how she, with her work at the school, is working quite closely and alongside the former Archbishop of Canterbury's son. And she was just reflecting on how odd it is, how you'd never have guessed it, that she said herself, leaving school without any qualifications, is now working closely with someone who belongs to a very different part, higher part of society, with lots of degrees and education, etc. And just it's amazing how, as we trust Jesus and follow him, he leads us into all sorts of places. There are no barriers and no boundaries as to where Jesus can take us when we trust him and say yes to him. It was such a privilege and a real treat to meet Denise and get to know her, hear some of her story, even through this medium, just talking to her over Zoom. There was just a peaceful, joyful presence, the presence of Christ, you might say, that came over in talking to her. It was a real honour. And the word that came over to me was just the word companion, as she was talking a few times, that we are invited into companionship with Jesus. That is, it means that we are those who are able to break bread with Jesus and be friends with him, but also be a companion with him throughout life, that he never leaves us and he helps us and endures with us and wants to teach us about himself through the things that we go through. And actually, as we walk with him, his heart, it starts to impress itself upon us, and that we should listen to and respond to the nudges of our companion Jesus wherever we find ourselves. Hopefully in the future we'll get Denise back on, perhaps even with Paul as a couples session, where they can, each of them, just share story after story. As Denise again shared with me afterwards, that she's got so many stories of how Jesus has helped her and allowed her to be an encouragement and offer encouragement to many. So I look forward to that one in the future. But for now, I hope that my conversation with Denise has motivated you, provoked you, challenged you, and of course, above all, just encouraged you with God's heart for you and for the world, that he wants to open our eyes to the people around us, that we would learn to love them as he loves them. And we, of course, can only love them as he loves them by first of all allowing ourselves to be loved by him, to know his love impressing itself upon us, such that we don't need people, we don't need to use people for self-attainment or for status. We don't need to use people at all. We can love people because we are fully loved ourselves. That's my prayer for you listening or watching, and certainly my prayer for myself, that I would know Jesus more in that way. Well, God bless you, and I look forward to bringing you more conversations in the future about the Christian life and leadership. Stay well. Until next time. Bye-bye.